Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Acura NSX buyer's guide, but this is the advanced version. I did a buyer's guide a couple years ago when I was looking for an Acura NSX, and I pride myself in doing a lot of research and a lot of due diligence before I buy a car, and this was no exception. But now that I've owned it for 2 years, I want to provide additional information for anybody who's looking to buy an Acura NSX, or if you're a new owner and you want to know what to look out for. So without further ado, let's kick it off. Well, first off, I absolutely love this car. This car is an amazing driving experience. I know I use the word amazing as a lot, but it really applies to this car. It is a very analog, driver's oriented car. It's just a blast to drive. If you are a new owner to your NSX, you know what I'm talking about. If you're thinking about getting one, trust me, you will have a great time. All right. So let's talk real quickly about the things that people will tell you automatically if you ask what you should look out for. And some of those things are going to be the snap ring for the transmission. So that applied for 1991 to 1992 cars. And if you put in Google what year, or if you go on the forums, it'll let you know. I think it's like serial numbers 3542 to serial number 5978. But you really want to make sure that you find that out before you buy a car. And it's not hard to look at the transmission number. I looked at mine. You could look at the production, and you could go real deep into researching like production numbers and all that. But essentially, that's something that you want to look out for. Now, if the car does fall in that range and somebody's like, hey, I've had the car for like 20 years or 30 years and I've never had an issue, that's going to kind of be one of those things where you're going to have to take their word for it. And essentially, you're just going to have to trust that, it's not going to fail during your ownership. Some people have addressed it, and you just want to make sure that that has been verified, just because somebody could say that something's been done, but without verification or some type of documentation, it's really hard to peek into a transmission that's, into your car, and that you can verify that that part has been switched out. So it's one of those things that you want to make sure that you don't overlook, and it's important. All right, another thing. So the crank hub, right, or the crank pulley. So apparently this car is susceptible to a crank pulley walk. And what happens is that the two halves of the pulley essentially separate. I guess they use the incorrect adhesive or glue or whatever. So there's a company that essentially puts a bracket that retains the hub and makes sure that it doesn't walk. Some people have already done that modification to prevent, that issue. Other people haven't, like myself. I haven't touched it. But it's good for you to look at the crank pulley to make sure that there's no separation or that's not coming apart. And that's one of those things that you definitely want to look at when you're going to buy an NSX. It doesn't take long to do it, and you simply want to just check that out. All right, the electronics on the Acura NSX are 30 years old. And if you think about the capacitors and the circuit boards and the way that things were designed, there was a big issue with capacitors in the 90s with just Japanese cars, electronics in general. Actually, I heard some big issues with computers. But essentially, a lot of things could go wrong with your AC unit, with your radio, and also with the SRS and the ABS and all kinds of stuff like that. So some of those things you want to do is when you look at the car and you test drive the car, you really want to make sure that all those components work, because all those components that I just mentioned are not cheap in the NSX. Even though this is a car that you can manage and maintain yourself, and it's just a really overall reliable car, those electronics will cost you a pretty penny. Let's talk about the AC system. If you have an AC system, you're essentially going to have to send that AC unit off for somebody to repair it. It's not you can't do it yourself unless you know about electronics and you can repair those. But essentially, there's already a known individual and shop that addresses those AC systems. So there is somebody out there who could help you with it, but it's not going to be cheap. So you just want to make sure that you ask them about the AC unit, you operate it. You can even buy a little temperature gauge. You want to make sure that the AC is also cool in stop and go traffic, and not get fooled by if you're just on the highway, because you won't really see the health of the AC system unless you're experiencing it in city driving, in my opinion. Also, I did talk about this in the first buyer's guide. A lot of people do convert to 134 Freon, and they take out the R12, and it's a very common and very recommended upgrade or modification. So you just want to make sure that you know what is in your vehicle, if it's R12 or if it's been converted over. But the control unit itself could have a lot of glitches. You want to make sure that works. Another thing with the radio, sometimes half of the radio works. That was the issue with mine. Half the speakers worked, or the amp didn't work, or there was static, or the buttons didn't work, and it just starts falling. You know, essentially there's a lot of issues with the radio, and it's extremely common. So you could try to have the radio refurbished. If you try to buy a new radio, I've seen them go for about over $1,000. It's not cheap at all. And a lot of people do Bluetooth conversions. I made my own video of how to take out the guts in a NSX radio and put a Kenwood radio. I'm not the first one to do it. My buddy Jasser, he did it, and I was inspired by him, and he kind of gave me some advice on how to do it. But even before he did it, people's been converting NSX radios for a long time, but it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. So if you think, oh, radio doesn't work, not a big issue, it's very expensive. So make sure that you look at that as well. As far as like the other things like the SRS, the ABS, and things like that, I really don't know a lot about them. I just know that I have an SRS light that I need to address. I know people have had ABS issues. I'm not sure if that's the module itself or the electronics, but it's just, you just want to make sure that the car itself is pretty sound electronically wise, because that's a big ticket item. I do want to give a quick plug to Joe Guttieri. I believe that's how you pronounce it, but he's located in the east side of the US, and he does services for the ABS unit and also for the AC system and other things, and he does a great job from what I hear. All right, one of the things too, I've made a lot of videos, and I'm very proud of the videos that we've made in driver's therapy, but the butterfly valves, they have just screws in there, and essentially over time they kind of walk themselves out or unscrew themselves. And essentially that could be a catastrophic issue where the screw goes into the combustion chamber and it could damage valves. And I could see it happening, or you get lucky and it just gets embedded in the cylinder wall, or it gets shot out through the exhaust. But anything could happen. And essentially I made a video how you can inspect that as well. And honestly, in the NSX buying process, it seems like a big issue. I would say it'd be controversial if I said you have to go check that out. I think you could ask the owner if he's looked at it, and if he has, then that's a great thing, or if he's addressed it. If he hasn't, I'm not sure as an owner myself, if I was selling a car, if I want somebody to check all of that. I have a video of mine, you know, showing that they're good, but best thing is verify to see if the owner has had any issues. And once you buy the car, if he doesn't want to let you, he or she doesn't want to let you verify that, one of the first things you should do is check those butterfly screws. And I have a video how to do that. And you buy this little camera, snake camera, and it's pretty straightforward. It is a Honda, and CV axles are a thing. I know. I'm not sure if mine's leaking. So what I did is, I'm not going to rebuild stuff. I just bought a new CV axle, and it was about $1,000. So yeah, this isn't your typical Honda CV axle. A CV axle for this bad boy, brand new from the Acura Honda dealership, is about over $1,000. So check those CV axles when you're buying an NSX. I think that's a really important thing. Okay, as far as that goes, some of the things that I'm gonna bring in that are not real common, but I think you should look at, is look at the front, both radiators and condensers, whatever you call them, and just look at their fins and make sure that they're not completely damaged, because that would impact cooling and that would impact your AC system. One of the things you're gonna definitely wanna look at, in my opinion, is seats. I replaced the seat covers on my NSX. It was not easy, but it wasn't hard. The seat covers I bought sat for a couple years, so they shrunk, and that's why it gave me a lot of trouble. But it is a process, but it is very doable for an owner. So just know that if you did it yourself, you would have to buy the seat covers, and they're, you know, about $1,200 to $1,500. And if you want to shop to do it, it's going to be about $2,000. But essentially, you know, don't pretend that it's a small ticket item. Make sure your seats are good. Besides that, for a buyer's guide, well, honestly, it depends on how you're going to drive the car. I like my car stock. It's just who I am and how I appreciate my cars. So the only thing that I did do is I put a 2B exhaust, and I love it. So just know that if you're gonna be buying an NSX, you know, if they have an exhaust with it, you know, maybe they took it off and they're asking if you want to buy it. You know, if you could get a good deal on it, I would buy it. I would buy it because it's just, I think it adds a little bit more character to the driving experience, and it's such an easy thing to take off. But I definitely would make sure that all your stock components are there. At one point in time, people would make fun of me about this, but I love these wheels and I think they're amazing, and I think they make the car what the car is. But if you're gonna buy this car, you're gonna want these wheels. These wheels, I don't know if it's a fluke in Bring a Trailer, because we know how that is, but essentially, some of them are now going for over $1,000. It's crazy. At one point in time, you couldn't get rid of them for a couple $100 from what I heard, but that's a really good thing. Now, this is in top of my buyer's guide. So you have to watch my buyer's guide, the first one, and then the advanced one, because I do talk about service records. I talk about paint. I talk about timing belt and water pump and clutch. And I talk about, you know, all the typical things like Carfax and, you know, doing, you know, making sure that the car is good, and, you know, things that address not only this car, but cars in general. So just want to make sure that everybody's tracking that this is a additional video to the buyer's guide. But besides that, I am very curious because the NSX community is so full of knowledge. And I make videos, but one of the great things I love is I learn from everyone. So if I miss something, please put it in the comments section below. And if it's really well written, I'll pin it to the top so other people could read it. Because these videos are designed to help somebody buy a car and for them to have a great experience with an NSX. And for the NSX community, that should be the ultimate goal, is for us to enjoy our cars and help one another out. Well, guys, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you soon. And we always welcome you to like the video if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe to follow along, and also to support Drivers Therapy. All right, guys, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.